You wrote an essay which I wanted to start with, really, saying that the most dramatic thing that happened is the EO on DEI, which included subsequently a revocation, as it were, of the affirmative action rule that LBJ put in place as an addendum to the Civil Rights Act, which essentially set up a legal and constitutional regime in which corporations in the country had to be very careful always of the racial, sex, and all the other compositions of their workforce. And that is now gone.
Yes.
Tell me why you think. I think you said it was the biggest event of the 21st century. Now, maybe you would just.
I said it was the biggest policy change of the 21st century on a level with Obamacare, which would have been the rival up till now.
But you think bigger than Obama?
Yeah, but the executive order, of course, of LBJ is not a constitutional thing, but it played into the civil rights legislation of 1964, which has been interpreted in a kind of a constitutional way. That Civil Rights Act mentions affirmative action, but in a very vague way, as kind of a synonym for give it the old college try. I mean, try really hard to integrate your workforce. This actually said, the LBJ executive order said businesses will need to have affirmative action programs if they're going to do business with the government. And elsewhere, they laid out what an affirmative action program was. And these businesses that were covered under this covered a quarter of the workforce. So basically, it turned all big businessmen into the affirmative action police, basically. And I would say, I would say that affirmative action is the cornerstone of civil rights enforcement. It's the way civil rights was brought to pass. First, as a way of fixing Jim Crow, but then, as a way of fixing the underrepresentation of women on corporate
Act
boards,
itself is actually colorblind, and it actually says, you can sue on the grounds of sexual orientation if you're a heterosexual.
Yes, it is.
As well as a homosexual. But no one interpreted it that way, although I noticed that there's a new case.
There is a
just
case
come up.
now, yes, that has in which a heterosexual is claiming to have been victimized by a kind of a gay mafia of a sort.
That has never happened.
It's never happened. But I any of these
Hollywood
things
is
are
entirely meritocratic.
Yeah, right. But I mean, any of these things are theoretically plausible. But in fact, I don't think that there have ever been damages awarded in a case in which a white person sued by saying this corporation was so keen to hire black people that they didn't hire me, and I don't think that's ever happened. So in practice, it was a pretty monodirectional thing. That's not actually the part of civil rights that these Trump executive orders touched. What they did was they did a couple of very interesting things. They repealed that Lyndon Johnson
the affirmative action EO
thing,
I think, or whatever it was.
But they also said that they would not enforce these affirmative diversity, equity, and inclusion rules anymore.
Not just that, they actually excised them from the federal government as they're in the process, and said that if you are pursuing them, the DOJ at this point will be looking out for you.
So that's the
second move,
things.
right?
That's the second move. So the first move is to say, you can't practice DEI, but the second move, the first move is to say you can no longer do affirmative action and DEI and that kind of thing. But the second move is to say, we believe that DEI is actually racism. And that is of course, there's a good argument for that, but that is the curious element of it, because conservatives had always argued against the excesses of civil rights on a kind of a principled way. Actually, civil rights, well-meaning though it was, granted too much power to the federal government, and that power needs to be constrained. What the Trump administration has done is, remember, it started that executive order by praising the civil rights, the core civil rights legislation of the 1960s. So it actually laid claim to that power and is running the whole machine in reverse.
Right.
And so that is a That is something that's actually never been done before. And suddenly we're in a totally different world. And the curious thing is, I mean, people like you and I have been discussing these questions in such a, I don't know, in such a bookish way. And it's sort of like saying, well, if the Supreme Court accepts this version of that doctrine, perhaps it will be possible to argue in a future case that X, Y, and Z. But Trump has just gone like, Samuel Johnson with the stone in the road and said, I refute it thus. It's suddenly done. And that's why this is so significant.
It's intellectually clarifying, right? It's basically my dream come true. I've opposed, I'm in favor of non-discrimination law, in as much as I think if people are obviously discriminated against for a reason that has nothing to do with the job, and it's an involuntary characteristic, I can totally see the justice in saying someone should have the right to sue. But this idea that everything has to reflect the entire equal demography of any particular place and time seems incredibly onerous and
it's not
dangerous.
Just onerous and dangerous. That is the key thing.
Because
and
race,
dangerous.
As we found out, even doing these DEI sessions, in fact, studies have found that they make people more racist, not less racist, because you become obsessed with this bloody thing.